Welcome back. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says any deal between the U.S. and Iran must include an agreement against enriching uranium, calling it, quote, a very clear red line. Now, Iran's supreme leader launched a tirade against President Trump on Saturday over the weekend, saying this: Trump said he wants to use power for peace. He's lying. Iran's foreign minister dismissed the threats from the Trump administration against nuclear enrichment, writing this on X: if the U.S. is interested in ensuring that Iran will not have nuclear weapons, a deal is within reach, and we are ready for a serious conversation. Enrichment in Iran, however, will continue with or without a deal. Joining me now is former Senior Director for National Security Council and Principal Architect of the Abraham Accords, Robert Greenway. Robert, thanks very much for joining us this morning. What is your reaction to this hostility from Iran?
Well, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on, Maria. I think the president has again concluded that enrichment equals weaponization. And so that appears to be where the current talks are headed, at an impasse between Iran's insistence and belligerence in insisting that it must maintain the right to enrich, which isn't required for any peaceful nuclear program. But that, of course, is not what Iran has. Iran's ambitions are clear. They've resurrected their nuclear program, and they're in a race to do it, closer now than they've ever been. And President Trump resurrecting his calls for the end of the JCPOA in 2016, and his first administration recognizing that as long as Iran maintains the capacity to enrich uranium, they'll have a pathway to a nuclear weapon. That's on full display now that 14,000 centrifuges allowed to be retained during the JCPOA are back in operation, and it brought Iran to the threshold.
Yeah, it sure did. And you know, for a minute there, we thought that we were actually seeing, you know, some direct talks and an opportunity for the United States to quiet down Iran. And yet now with this belligerent conversation that they're going to continue enriching uranium with or without, the U.S. is okay on this.
Yeah, as the president stated, this is going to end one of two ways, either with cooperation or coercion. And in the end, the United States has demonstrated a capacity to do it, and this president means it, unlike the previous administration that appeased them with unlimited access to resources. And look, they're enriching now to 60%, not required by a civil nuclear program. Important to remember, it's not a 90% threshold that we're worried about. The bomb we dropped on Hiroshima was majority enriched to 50%, only a fraction to 80%. They're already there and developing a delivery system that's capable of reaching the United States. The threat couldn't be more real, and time is of the essence on this. And the president's trip to the Middle East shored up support for the United States and our partnership with partners and allies, an all-important signal to Iran as we get now down to the threshold, in the end, perhaps, of these negotiations.
Well, I think this is a very key point that you make, Robert. The fact that President Trump had such a successful trip in the Middle East last week had to send messages to Iran. Liz Peek, jump in here. Iran had to be watching that trip and saying, okay, there are red lines even with our allies here in the Middle East.
Yeah, Robert, it seems to me two things. One, the breakthrough with Syria is incredibly important as it continues to ring fence Iran, which is great. But secondly, why would we go back to a situation where Iran is going to have to comply with strictures on what they're doing in terms of nuclear enrichment, what they're using it for? We know even the Europeans now have admitted that they cheated throughout the entire JCPOA. They pretended they weren't enriching uranium for military purposes. We now know that they were doing that. What's changed? Why could we believe them now?
Robert?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and look, not only are they enriching at unprecedented levels and developing a delivery system and a nascent ICBM, they're also engaged in regional terrorism and bear culpability for the attacks of October the 7th. And so the Houthis' attacks on Israel that sustained, the attacks against commercial shipping are all bearing the hallmarks of Iranian sponsorship of regional terrorism. And so that is, I think, more than sufficient evidence to conclude that if they were in possession of a nuclear weapon, they might well use it. As recently as November of 2023, Khamenei, the supreme leader in Iran, stated that death to America is not a slogan. It is their stated policy. And it's not the first time he said it. And it's certainly genuine. And again, the president's Mideast trip accomplished a number of objectives, not least of which is restoring American control over global energy markets, which is critical message to Iran that they no longer will benefit by management and also by unprecedented prices for oil. But it also sends a signal to Moscow that they're no longer going to to enjoy the same benefits as an oil exporter, and a message to Beijing that they're no longer going to be unrestricted access to Middle Eastern resources. All of that was on display for the president's trip.
Yeah, that is such a great point. That is just genius. You're right. Meanwhile, the peace talks between Israel and Hamas apparently resuming on Saturday in Qatar. The release of 10 living hostages and a temporary 2-month halt in the fighting now on the negotiating table. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that 20 hostages are currently alive in Gaza. And the Wall Street Journal reported that before Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, the terrorist group head, the Gaza chief, told associates, quote, an extraordinary act would be required to derail talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which is incredible. Right before the October 7th attacks, this, as new reports show, Israeli and Syrian officials have been holding secret talks on the possibility of Syria joining the Abraham Accords, Robert. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think the comments made in response to the president's decision are right in recognizing, one, that the United States insisted that Russia not be allowed a foothold back into Syria, Iran not be restored, and that they don't engage in terrorist acts. And then if that were to happen, then we would withhold enforcement of sanctions applied against Syria. I think it's a message to our partners and allies in the regions that the United States will listen and work with them, and that there's hope. But I think, again, trust has not been earned, nor is it warranted under the circumstances. And I don't suspect necessarily he'll be able to deliver on it, but I think it's worth a shot. And the president has always been inclined to prefer diplomacy instead of the use of force.
President Trump spoke about the Abraham Accords while he was on the ground in the Middle East this week. Here's the president on that. Watch.
I especially want to thank and congratulate the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain for their vision and courage in signing the historic Abraham Accords. But in the future, we'll continue that progress by adding more countries to the Abraham Accords. We have the 4, and I think they're going to be filling up very rapidly.
Robert, what is most hopeful here? When might we see another country join the Abraham Accords, and would the Saudis do it?
I think there's no question that it's going to happen. My bet is it's going to happen earlier rather than later in this second Trump administration. It's great to see him pick up exactly where he left off and build on the foundations of his legacy foreign policy achievement. There's no question it's going to happen. And I think Iran, of course, has to be probably resolved before expansion can occur, but it's going to happen and going to happen soon.
Meanwhile, President Trump is he's doing so much at once. He's got a phone call scheduled today with Vladimir Putin at 10 a.m. He will also then separately speak with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Russia, meanwhile, launched one of the largest drone barrages into Ukraine since the invasion began, Robert. So, where are we on this, and what should we expect from this phone call with Putin today?
I think the president's patience is wearing thin, and it's small wonder. Putin has demonstrated that he has very little interest in allowing this conflict to end anytime soon, which means I think that the president may issue a final warning before really turning the economic screws to Putin. He posted economic growth, the GDP growth of 4.1% last year, a point better thanks to Biden appeasement and slack enforcement of sanctions. So I think that could come to an end if the president decides that Putin is no longer interested in achieving a ceasefire under the current conditions, and I think that's very likely to occur.
Well, is there anything you want to say about China here? Because it seems like China, on the one hand, claims that, okay, we're taking the tariffs down for this 90-day pause, and on the other hand, it's complicit supporting all of the U.S.'s adversaries, whether it be Russia, Iran, North Korea.
There's no question about it. And I think the president recognizes that the strategic imperative in negotiations with either Iran or with Russia all come back to China. He cannot allow cooperation to exist between Russia and China, nor between Iran and China. And I think that's exactly why he's pressing on all fronts simultaneously.
Yeah, Robert, it's great to get your insights. As always, we so appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for